It's 6 o'clock in London. It's 1 p.m. in New York. Enjoy your lunch. 1 a.m. in Hong Kong if you're still up that late in the wonderful city-state on the verge of China. 3 a.m. in Sydney, 10 a.m. in San Francisco, and 10:30 at night in Mumbai. Greetings, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Patrick L. Young. Welcome to this, the IPO video live stream, Series 4, Episode 1, goes live now. 019 starts here. Last week's IPO-VID was another epic conversation. We didn't generate as much data as the cleansed 15 petabyte lake within BMLL technology, but with CEO Paul Humphrey, we had a great chat about big data and much, much more. Also, I was delighted to hear afterwards an element of clairvoyance about my own input after my thoughts that BMLL ought to be using their ability to replay the GameStop Farrago in real time could help somebody's movie scripts. No sooner did I say that than apparently it was announced that Netflix have a pre-production of GameStop the movie. Hopefully, they're going to be using BMLL data. And good evening, Jake Bolton, 6 p.m. in Birmingham indeed. I don't do Birmingham accents very well, but lovely to see you. Since our last show, ladies and gentlemen, we had the Super Brawl, or the Super Bowl, or, well, actually, nowadays, we might as well call it the Super Brady, I suppose. I mean, given that 3 times as many people watched that TV advertising festival, which is bookended with concerts, and it's genius, actually. They even have a sort of a football match in the middle of it as well. 3 times as many people watched that as actually managed to watch the presidential inauguration. Is it now unreasonable, I wonder, to suggest it's time for the Tom Brady as president bumper stickers? Elsewhere, we got a new Hong Kong exchange CEO and an IPO record in Hong Kong of oversubscription for Kuaishou. That's the social media platform for live streaming preferred by, amongst others, China's farmers. Anyway, Kuaishou attracted bids of more than $370 billion. That is greater than the entire GDP of Hong Kong. They were chasing $5.4 billion worth of stock. Retail investors alone had $162 billion of margin loaned funding, leaving that segment of the IPO alone 1,200 times oversubscribed. That's not the only amazing stats that we get out of Kuaishou. Some 305 million people spend 86 minutes every day, that's pretty much a football match, barring injury time, on this app. That helped it propel the IPO up 160% on the first day of trading, making Kuaishou worth $158 billion, which is more than the 2 biggest exchanges in the parish of markets, as discussed by Exchange Invest, Hong Kong Exchanges and the Intercontinental Exchange, or the CME, any 2 from 3. You could buy for the equivalent of this agrarian social media platform. Or to put it in perspective, in a local equivalent, that is more than the value of HSBC Bank, Standard Chartered Bank, and Hang Seng Bank put together. Meanwhile, in London, cannabis shares have traded for the first time. Well, given that the London Stock Exchange Group just bought Refinitiv, as we were discussing last week, the old Reuters financial business, doubtless those folks at the London Stock Exchange Group need low latency access to as much high quality ganja as they can possibly get. All this and more has been covered already in greater detail in Exchange Invest Daily, the unique newsletter of the Bourse business. Send us an email or hit me up wherever you're watching this on social media. I'm Patrick Young. Whatever stream you're watching this on, and we can get you signed up to understand the Exchange Business Daily. Our guest today is Lee Hodgkinson, OSTC. Accelerating your digital trading career is the topic of today's conversation. Lee is an old friend. He's the former boss of Euronext London and SmartPool. He began his career at the London Stock Exchange before working for HSBC and BNP Paribas. Therefore, a little bit like Paul Humphreys last week, he's enjoyed the excitement of being in the banking business as well as being in the exchange world. Lee moved on from Euronext to join the dynamic exchange-traded derivatives proprietary trading firm OSTC as CEO in April 2018. building the award-winning enterprise into a globe-spanning digital champion of training, technology, and talent in financial markets, and all from the sunny county of Kent. While OSTC can increasingly enable anyone anywhere to accelerate their trading career, that's what we're going to be discussing during the course of the evening. But first of all, let's check in with Lee. Lee, good evening. Where in the world are you today?
Evening, Patrick and viewers. I'm in Royal Tunbridge Wells in the county of Kent, which was, I think, formerly known as the Garden of England, now known as the home of the new COVID variant. So, I guess no publicity is bad publicity, right?
The new COVID variant, is it too early to manage jokes like I prepared their earlier stuff? But anyway, music quips aside, I suppose, yes, indeed, it is interesting you're coming from Kent. So you are not in the office this evening, along with things, but you've got, a very, very interesting business we're going to get on to in just a moment. Talk to me a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your career and how you got here.
Well, way back in, I think, 87, post Big Bang, I used to collect deal tickets in my school holidays at James Capel. Ended up at the London Stock Exchange, where I spent most of the 90s. Quick pit stop in the Cayman Islands, helping them develop an exchange out there. Came back to work for Richard Kilsby for a company called TradePoint, which was one of the earliest, if not the first, alternative market in Europe, owned by a consortium of investment banks and the Swiss Exchange. Ended up doing 10 years at the Swiss Exchange, most of which was in Zurich, which was a fantastic experience. Joined NYSE under the SmartPool JV with BNP, JP Morgan, and HSBC 2009, and went through a range of senior executive roles there through, NYSE, Euronext, Life, all kinds of things. And then we were acquired by ICE, spent an amazing 18 months working for ICE, and then with Dominic Cerruti and Anne-Marie Doge, span off Euronext. 3.5 years there, an absolutely amazing experience, a brilliant company, lot of success. Decided, after that 10-year cycle, it was time for a fresh challenge, and arrived at OSTC nearly 3 years ago. And it's been a fantastic experience so far, and loving every minute of it, notwithstanding the challenges of lockdown, and looking forward to the next 3 years.
So, quite an incredible career already. Very, very interesting. Thank you very much for the comments, incidentally. Good to hear from you, Peter Leonardos. Hope you're enjoying the sun out there in Florida. Yes, indeed, I have shaved. How could I possibly manage to compete with the incredibly hirsute Lee Hodgkinson this evening, who's obviously been crafting this beard for quite some weeks, I think.
I'm growing it for Paul Humphrey. After last week, I thought you could do with a bit of help. You did a great job, I have to say. Which someone said to me, tonight's got to be a cross between Love Island and Britain's Got Talent to compete with him last week. So we'll give it a shot.
Well, it's an interesting alternative way to look at these sorts of things. So therefore, you're in lockdown at the moment, but you're in Kent. And OSTC, the business, that's an incredible story of the Garden of England. It's 4 guys all from Kent coming together and building a great trading firm.
Yeah, they, I think they were all at school together, all traded on the life floor together, throughout the glory years. And then set up, after the floor went electronic, I believe above the Sainsbury's in Chislehurst, with about 40 other traders. And a remarkable story really grew. I think what the skills that make you a great pit trader are often transformed into weaknesses when you've got to sit in front of screens for 12 hours a day. And I think, they found the going, quite tough. But in 2003, 2004, they found some opportunities in Poland. As Poland was coming into the European Union, And they really found an incredibly talented population, a lot of young, smart, ambitious people. And the idea was formed that, we could teach these people how to trade, that the education system's really fantastic, a lot of good economic benefits. And they opened the first trading floor in Warsaw, did a lot of work with the local universities, found the right people, brought them in, did all of the hard work in training them. And that business really, over 15 years, just grew and grew and grew around the world. And when I arrived and started to think about, diagnosing strategy, what struck me was that not only was this an amazing trading company, but actually a lot of its core competencies were around training and education and talent management. And in many cases, that's where the special sauce was, those real core competencies and a lot of the DNA. And from that, we started to develop what became the Zishi brand with the artificial intelligence, the biometrics and the education business, and started to monetize that and externalize it. And now we're on a path of, making a number of strategic acquisitions to really grow that business symbiotically around the emerging world. And, it's a market really worth pursuing, right? There's 1.7 billion people on planet Earth aged between 10 and 24 years old, and all of them need education and jobs. And most of them are living, in the developing and emerging world. So, we think we've got a fantastic opportunity to help with financial literacy and to help people really get workplace ready and thrive in financial services. And we've got our business in China and India and Russia, obviously in Poland, and we'll be building on those foundations, but also looking at the Middle East and in years to come in Africa as well. So it's a very, very exciting time.
Really fascinating altogether to manage to see all of that coming together. And so at the moment, actually, do you know how many countries you're in full stop? Because, you've just reeled off 8 or 9 in the course of one sentence.
Yeah, I think we've got at the moment, we've got 12 offices across 7 countries. I think we'll do a lot more in China as a strategic priority, for obvious reasons. India, I think we can do a lot more. Again, these fantastic young, well-educated, ambitious populations. We start to see the Middle Eastern countries beginning their transitions away from energy-dominated economies to service economies. We think there's a lot of opportunity there. And at this point about Africa, I think is really fascinating. 20 or 30 years out, I think a third of the world's population will live in Africa. Countries like Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, there are, in Ghana alone, there's 100,000 graduates a year coming from 8 really good universities. English speaking, English legal system, pretty much same time zone. The opportunity for us to help those people fulfill their potential and to be plugged into the capital markets of the world, I think it's a brilliant opportunity for all stakeholders, not just OSTC, but those individuals on the ground. And we're really starting to think about how we can drive these activities at more scale around the world. So it's an incredibly exciting time. And COVID, in many respects, although it's clearly been an extremely challenging period, I think has also enabled us to accelerate some of the plans that we've already had around a digital workforce. Bring a couple of years worth of work into 6, 9, 12 months, and really, we can start to scale without necessarily, investing in physical premises everywhere. So it's been a revelation, really.
That's really interesting. I want to get back to that physicality issue in just a second, but we've got a question from one of our previous guests, Martin Watkins. Good evening. Lovely to see you. Hope you're doing well on the on the other side of the M25, effectively, from where Lee is coming to us today. Hi, Lee. How much emphasis are you putting on training graduates on digital assets?
Well, good evening, Martin. Good to hear from you. Thanks for your question. So it's a really interesting question. From a trading perspective, from our own core business, we are taking a follower role on digital assets. We've got some exploratory projects where we're really learning and getting to understand that world. Clearly, as it matures, it will become a more mainstream set of activities, and we'll scale up along with that. I thought the Tesla news earlier this week was very interesting in that regard. So we don't train any of our own people yet on digital assets, but in terms of offering external training and education, yes, very much so. We offer those services. I think there'll be two themes that we'll specialize in, looking ahead. One is ESG, and the other will be digital assets. This is a fascinating part of our industry. So for us, it's core trading business will be a follower. I think on training and education externally, we'll be a leader.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you very much, Martin Watkins, for your question. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've got a question for Lee about the world of trading, about the world of trading in this fascinating marketplace via OSTC, who are trying to teach the world and make their impact on some of the 1.7 billion people between the ages of 10 and 25 who are looking for education and trying to understand, ask us a question. We'll be delighted to answer them. And indeed, we have a question almost immediately coming to us from sunny Florida, from none other than a name you might indeed recognize, Peter Leonardos. Peter Leonardos has a question. Hi, Peter. Good to see you. Traders typically look the same and come from similar backgrounds. How do you promote diversity and inclusion in a global financial services firm? Great question. Lee.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is super important to us at OSTC. I think if you go back and think about what happened in the credit crunch, the financial crisis, groupthink, wasn't the only issue, but it certainly played a very strong role in some of the issues that we saw. And it seems to me that organizations that avoid groupthink typically are better decision makers, they're more creative, they're more innovative, and they are better organizations at attracting young and talented people and retaining them. And so it's a very important development for us to move away on the groupthink element. Now, in addition, as part of that, we started to survey a couple of years back, survey our employees worldwide, really get to understand more about them in a diversity and inclusion context. And what the results we got back upset me, because I found myself leading a company where about 10% of respondents had either basically said, I have a different sexual orientation, but I don't like to talk about it in the office, or I don't even want to engage with you on this question. And that upset me, because I want to run an organization where people can come to work every day and be themselves and succeed as and be comfortable in their own skin, because they will just do better and they'll perform better. And it's, yes, there's a moral imperative, but leave that aside. It doesn't make any sense to constrain people. And so that set us on a path really of addressing that. We started with gender equality. We set some targets, and I know quotas are not a popular thing, but sometimes you need to break the back of it. And I set every leader's objectives and part of their bonus on breaking down the gender barriers. And now we've had some pretty good success around that. Certainly in the support functions, where our hiring's at 50-50. On the trading side, there's more work to be done. And we started to look at the other questions, sexual orientation being a very important one. We joined Stonewall, we're now, very, very much aligned with diversity inclusion. We hired an amazing woman called Faiza Tahir, who leads that work for us. But it's not just something that HR does to the executive team and to the company. It's embedded in everybody's objectives. Clearly, Black Lives Matter was a pivotal moment last year. We had some really inspiring sessions with some of our Black colleagues, again, which redefined so many things about the way that we think about the workplace. And I'll be forever indebted for their courage in sharing what they did. And again, from that position, we've changed the way that we recruit. So we're now using different recruitment firms. We're finding talent from parts of society that we wouldn't have otherwise looked in. Tomorrow, you will see an announcement from us on working with an amazing company that helps us source disabled job seekers. I want us to be an organization that is leading the industry on being, literally open to anyone, anywhere. If you've got a brain, 2 eyes, and you can click a mouse, you're welcome in our firm. And I think that is just something that's really core to our values. But we need to do better. And, we're in society and an industry that, needs to learn a great deal of, from gender all the way through to LGBT plus, all the way through to ethnicity. There's so much to do, but it's really, really core to the primary values of OSTC, and it's great for us to have a really, Peter's a top gun in our industry. Delighted that he could come on board, and delighted that he leads a lot of work internally in our LGBT groups, and really, I think, just demonstrates to everybody that we walk the talk. It's not just virtue signaling or looking good. We really mean it, and I call on everybody in the industry to follow our lead. Quite frankly, we can definitely make a change. There's a lot of brilliant people around, but we've really got to get to grips with this in society. I think, certainly in the West.
I think it's fantastic altogether. Thank you very much, Peter Leonardos, for a great question. It's lovely to hear from you. And it's actually really interesting to hear such a comprehensive approach to what you're understanding and trying to do, Lee. I think it's also great that you're pushing forward with trying to help all kinds of equality and demonstrating that free markets can actually work for people, and therefore they can help everybody in every way, wherever, in order to work with their enterprise, something which is not necessarily broadly understood by some of the people who may be involved in advocating for what they see as being equal rights without understanding the power of markets in order to manage to push people forward. And I think that's a really, really vital factor altogether. And something which, obviously NASDAQ and so on have been pushing very hard for it. And I know that I think Adina Friedman's very, very pleased that there's been such a very positive reaction to their trying to nudge, for example, boards in terms of having better understanding of what is their diversity, etc. Even though some people have pushed back quite viciously. And yet again, they're not looking at quotas. They're looking at the whole concept of managing change through nudging, just as you are. But I got to say, that's one huge nudge, actually, when you think about it, because it's such a comprehensive strategy. And Timothy Campbell is saying, great answer, Lee, which is an absolutely excellent, shining testimony to what you're getting up to at OSTC. Super question. Thank you very much, Lee. Thank you very, very much, Peter Leonardos, for asking that. It's great to hear from you at all times. Changing gears slightly, but still on the whole opportunity mantra, we have, I'm not sure of your Christian name, S-Wave. He's coming along, and he is someone who knows Jake Pugh, a friend of this channel, and knows him from his time in politics, and therefore Jake was recommending our channel. So I'm interested in learning more about prop shops and trading in general, but I find myself torn between the OSTC pathway and the path of shadowing somebody from within the industry. Which path would you recommend, Lee?
I would recommend actually getting we do a range of courses for people, from one day introductions, 2 or 3 day specific masterclasses. But with Sheffield Hallam, we also run a level 5 program, which is essentially gives you 30 credits towards a degree, that gives you an in-depth theoretical and practical insight into the world of trading. I would certainly get into one of those courses first and foremost. And I think the reason that I say that is that the theory is one thing, but the practical is another. There's so many smart people that we come across who, on paper and through all of the tests and the AI profiling, look like they're going to be suited for trading. Actually, when they get into it, find they don't like the environment. And again, the environment is often not what people think. We are, as an industry, cursed by the Wolf of Wall Street and the crazy movies on Netflix. If you came to our trading floors, actually they're incredibly boring places. You've got a large number of highly intellectual, introverted people sitting in front of screens. It's like a library. And so it's really, getting into that environment and understanding the culture. So I would get into some of our courses that do workplace readiness training, rather than start shadowing somebody else.
Great answer. Thank you very much. I hope that helps you, S-Wave. Thank you very much for your questions. Delighted to have you on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've got a question, now is the time to ask about the world of proprietary trading, and indeed closing this skills gap, not just for the 1.7 billion people who are between the ages of 10 and 25 throughout the emerging world, but many others besides through the offices of OSTC, which started, of course, from the Garden of England in Kent 20 years ago when the life floors were closed and, thanks to the capital market revolution, markets began to go electronic. Meanwhile, please, ladies and gentlemen, if I can just ask you, can you give us a little bit of love? We would appreciate, as we're in the run-up to St. Valentine's Day, we don't ask to be your Valentine, but could you possibly send us a little bit of love? Just hit that like button, whatever social media you're watching this through at this point in time on the live stream. Every like helps us, and it helps us get up to the top, and it helps us spread the message so that we can manage to bring trading and investment coherently, sensibly, to as many people as we can across the globe. Thank you very much for your comments. If you've got any more questions, ping them over to us. We've got one. We're back on to diversity, the interesting topic. Women on it. Good to hear from you again this evening, woman on it. Delighted to hear. Excellent question. What are, Lee, the top 5 soft skills all career-driven females, in your opinion, should have?
I think there's only one thing really. Ultimately, just be yourself. I think I understand why that question's asked, but I don't think the soft skills that men or women have should be different. I think the most important thing is do what you love. Do it in an environment where you feel valued and the work is meaningful from you, that you get fairly paid. But be yourself. That's the most important advice I can give to anybody. And if you can't be yourself in the organization that you're in, move somewhere where you can.
So be prepared to be flexible and get moving if you can't be in that organization. Clearly, OSTC is very eager to have as many. Well, you're saying that you're actually up to the point of 50-50 employment at the moment between.
Yeah, in terms of we set a target certainly in our support services. I think in the trading business generally, there's a bigger problem, and we're trying to work out how to solve this at the moment. That we get lots of female candidates who have a perception of the trading business that is very far away from reality, and we know, we all know why that is. Rolling that back is tough, and it's not something that can be done quickly. We're trying many different ways of achieving that. But on the support functions, yeah, we're at 50-50. And again, the next stage is to start to bring the same level of discipline and thinking into underserved minorities, parts of society. And back to your point about Adina at NASDAQ, and I know that some people have seen that as controversial, but one of the great strengths that we find at our company is that we've got a collection of executives that are different. We've got some ex-military people. We've got some people from underprivileged parts of society. We've got some highly educated, sophisticated people. We've got some we've got some non-Brits. We've got people from all over the world, different races, creeds, colors, religions. The great thing is when you're really into the decision-making process, all of that background and all of that experience and the differences, if you're brave enough to let it all come into the open, you end up making really, really good decisions, and they stick. And that's because it's not just guys like us sitting around the table who have our backgrounds and we know everything and we're not challenged. The best thing for me is to be challenged by the people that I work with, right?
It's the great Cindy Gallop thing about white guys talking to white guys about being white guys, and then somehow or other they don't notice what are 175,000 trends. I mean, it's this issue. I mean, also you look at that share, nobody has heard about it. There's been no reporting about it in the Western media whatsoever. But yet in the Chinese media, they're going absolutely crazy about it because it's got, these outrageous metrics. More than the entire population of Europe are watching it every day. Right. It's quite incredible. It really is. And actually, I'm going to have to interrupt myself there because we've got so many questions building up. It's wonderful. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for all these questions. I'm going to go to a LinkedIn user. I'm sorry, your name didn't come through, so maybe we can just call you Linked and be familiar. Well, that's a bit of an epic. I look as if I've got my face mask on as I'm trying to read it. According to data from Catalyst, the double-bind dilemma for women in leadership, damned if you do, doomed if you don't. There is an assumption made in society that people generally don't like female leaders. Why is that the default? Why don't we love female leaders? I've got to say, actually, I'm going to interrupt myself here and say, as someone who thinks Margaret Thatcher was the greatest leader of a Western democracy in history and has just been praising Adina Friedman, I totally get where you're coming from with this question. But I don't think that I agree with you because actually I think female leaders are absolutely sensational. Lee, I'm sorry, I interrupted the question by answering it myself.
I can only speak from my own experience, right? I was brought up in a single parent family. In the 70s, I saw my mother hold a job down in the city, bring me up, do the plumbing, do the decorating, whatever had to be done. I think that instilled in me a remarkable respect and admiration for what women are capable of. At OSTC, we have fantastic female leaders, and again, I understand the question, but I think there are some remarkable female leaders out there that command the respect. Jacinta Ardern in New Zealand, Angela Merkel in Germany. Their response to this incredible crisis, I think, has been unparalleled. And Kamala Harris, I think, in the US as well. So I think the tide is turning from a societal perspective. As I say, in my organization. The only barrier to whether you can be a leader is whether you're capable, and nothing else.
Great answer. Thank you very much for that from LinkedIn. We've got a series of questions coming up. Timothy Campbell, Dan Colliff, another LinkedIn user. We're going to be with you in just a second. But for now, a friend of this show, Jonathan Seymour. Lovely to hear from you again, Jonathan, asking an exchange-related question. So, Lee, what have exchanges done, if anything, over recent years to attract more trading business from firms like OSTC?
Well, hello, Jonathan. Good to hear from you. I think that there's been a lot done really. I think as the exchanges, over the last decade have become more competitive in the derivative business with each other. There have been various schemes and initiatives to promote liquidity providers across the world, and long may it continue. I think that it's very easy for industry commentators to take a dim view of incentives and schemes in the derivative business, but I think they're essential, particularly around getting new markets and new products off the ground. So I think it's moved on a long way from the days when we were at Life. Exchanges clearly now have a much broader focus than just the derivative business. But we're very pleased with the relationships we have with exchanges. There's a lot of symbiosis in terms of mutual benefit and growth. What I think is really interesting is, beyond the big Western exchanges, we're starting to engage with the Asian exchanges on a more dynamic basis, and they're starting to realize that their environment is becoming more competitive. So I think the next frontier of those commercial discussions really be in Asia, as much as they are in the US and Western Europe.
Well, we had that very interesting thing actually just a couple of shows ago, because Will Mitting was on from Acuity, and he was pointing out the fact that, 74% of prop trading firms are now looking at expanding into Asia. I can't possibly ask you or expect you to comment as to whether you were one of those people responding to his poll, but certainly it was a very interesting number in terms of the development going forward.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're very open about the opportunity to trade Chinese domestic product as those markets emerge. I think it has the potential to be an immense commercial opportunity for the international trading community. So we're front and center with our partners in China and Yongyang of capturing that opportunity as it arises. I think that there's a lot more to be done in places like Hong Kong and Singapore. Some of the markets in Thailand and Malaysia are also very, very interesting. So, and we haven't touched on India, which I think by lots traded is now pretty much, the world's largest exchanges. So there's a tremendous amount of activity that'll be coming out of the Asian exchanges. And I think as we move through, the next 10 or 15 years, and we start seeing some of the ESG challenges and some of the challenges perhaps around, agricultural products, if the world is going to have 9 billion people in it, in 20 or 30 years' time, it can't feed that many people. What's going to happen to the agricultural industry? How's that going to be? How's that going to change? How are we going to hedge those risks? How are commercial providers going to be developing new products, synthetic meats, all of these kind of things. So there'll be a lot of change, I think, coming up for our industry, and much of it will take place in Asia, which is why we spend so much time, really positioning ourselves and driving activity in China and India.
Yes, it's really interesting. And in fact, you're talking about India there. I mean, fascinating place altogether. I had some good comments this morning in a piece in the Morning Context, thanks to Jayshree for interviewing there. And they were talking about GIFT, Gujarat International Financial Trading Center, which is obviously somewhere that is already attracted. I mean, the bulk of business they've got is proprietary trading business so far, which is just incredible, because they're essentially hoving out a new city out of nothing in order to make it a financial center, which is just one of many. And in fact, one other pointer that sprang to mind was, you didn't mention, was the fact that South America, I think, now has more futures and options trading than Europe, if I recall correctly, by contrast.
Brazil, I mean, Brazil, we're good friends of the exchange group down there. Brazil will be a very important country, again, with that commodities thematic. I think things are going to get very interesting, right? Because what we know, of course, is that, China and America will be in competition to a much greater extent than perhaps years gone by, as President Biden has been talking about. What does that mean for Brazil? what does that mean for India? There are opportunities to innovate and to offer alternatives around some of those, competitive dynamics. So I do expect, these south-south shifts to become even more important than they have been. So you're right, Brazil, India, China, there's a lot of activity, and it's extremely exciting, particularly for a firm like ours.
Very exciting. So many opportunities. Thank you, Dan Culler, for your question. Hi, Lee and Patrick. What are your thoughts on the recent boom in retail trading in equities? Would you consider expanding OSTC's trading and training capabilities to retail?
Well, good evening, Diane. When Diane and I worked together, if this was happening in the retail space, we would have been very, very happy, because it would have been driving a lot of yield for us at Euronext. It's fascinating. I'm torn over what we're seeing. On the one hand, I love the fact that technology is democratizing access to markets and encouraging a new generation of investors. The flip side is that it's hard to, as someone who, has grown up in, orderly markets and infrastructure, it's hard to see some of the behaviors and activities that we're seeing from that kind of community. And, I think, the regulatory angle around orderliness and market abuse will need to be looked at as well. So swings and roundabouts. I think generally speaking, technology democratizing access is a good thing. But it'd be good to see some of the heat and the extremities taken out of it, I think, for the good of everyone. And I know, I think we've seen some very tragic stories in the last, 24 hours associated with that. We don't have plans to get into the retail business at all. We know what we're good at. We're very, very happy to educate people and to professionalize, investors out there. But we won't be moving into the kind of B2C space at all. It's not our area of expertise.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dan Culler, for your questions. Great to hear from you this evening. And now we have another friend, and in fact, a former colleague of yours, once again from the nicey Euronext days, because this is Ian Dudden. Hello, Ian. Good evening, Patrick and Lee. He says, good evening, Ian. Good to see you both again. It's a joy to see you too, Ian. Not expecting any trade secrets, obviously, but I'm curious whether you can share any insights about where your traders find the greatest trading opportunities in the markets during 2020. Rates, equities, commodities, or were they able to shift between sectors and markets according to the dynamics at the time?
That's a great question. Good evening, Ian. Hope you're well. Pretty much we've got a very diverse range of actors and products at OSTC. So, typically we were able to get exposure to, all of the asset classes over the year as they ebbed and flowed. And we're very, very risk averse. So we sat out, the dramatic negative pricing in oil, not for us in the front months and all that risk. But we've done well in those energy markets over the period that we've seen stability return and prices change. There were periods last year, some of the equity rolls were really good. Commodity markets, I think, have returned. So we pretty much, we've spent the last couple of years really diversifying. And interestingly, we've done that in part through our artificial intelligence technology, which really delves into 20 to 30 data points of each individual prospective trader coming into the firm, and helps us analyze what products and markets will be most suitable to their character. So we know that Euribor trades in a very different pattern to natural gas, for example, and someone with the right blend of confidence, risk appetite, loss aversion, maybe extraversion would be more suited to a particular particular product, and so we think a lot about hiring different blends of people in different offices. So we've got pretty much coverage on all products across the world, and we've moved that on from the earlier days of the firm where we're very much kind of life focused business.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating how, I mean, the guys that I used to know when we were all on the floor of the Life Exchange together umpteen million gazillion years ago, moving towards such a technology-driven firm doesn't necessarily seem to have been the most obvious thing that would happen to you once you left the life floor, which was a fairly analog environment. It's quite incredible, the whole development. And that actually brings us neatly to a question from Timothy Campbell. Hello again, Timothy. It's good to have you with us today. Thank you for your comment earlier. How is technology, particularly artificial intelligence, impacting for better or worse the world of trading?
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, we talk about, we did some groundbreaking work with the scientists at UCL. I mean, just incredibly smart people, and we've built this this tool that helps us, really understand our people. It's got 8 billion, reference points that the machine has trawled through, and it really helps us understand the kind of profile, the cluster in which an individual fits into, and we're then much more able to give them a set of products to trade that really suit their profile. The other thing that we do, we've heavily invested in, is this kind of fusion of the physical, the technical, and the biological with our biometric app. So we take, again, a range of physiological data points, including kind of heart rate variability, mood, sleep, a range of things, and we correlate the decisions that an individual takes within their own individual profile, and we correlate that with the outcome of those decisions from a P&L perspective. And what that does is it helps, it holds a mirror up to a trader. It's data from them, about them, for them. We don't get involved in monitoring that activity. It's really for them, and they can then adjust their own behavior, their own diet, their own sleep patterns, their own mood, to put them in it's a bespoke algorithm for each individual to put them in their optimum decision-making zone, and it enables them to stay there. So you, Patrick, might need, an energetic, slightly aggressive environment to make good decisions. I might need a more relaxed and calm environment. And what do you do if you're in a different mind state? How do you get yourself in your optimal zone? We help people understand that and coach them to getting into that optimum decision-making point and staying there. And that has, I think, a wider application, not just for trading, but for any material risk takers in any industry. It could be, just leaders of any business, could be airline pilots, surgeons, all kinds of things. So that cognitive technology and the biometric technology that we're pulling together under our Zishi brand is really quite special, and it starts to help you, really get into the detail and analyze data that lives below the surface and that we often, ignore or don't understand about ourselves. So absolutely fascinating, and it's starting to give us a real edge. I mean, the traders that we bring in are now profitable many months before they were previously, and that's because we've been refining who we look for, how we bring them into the firm, how we adjust to their learning style, what products we give them to trade, how much capital we give them. Nothing is left to chance. Everything is now empirically analyzed. It's starting to give us some really good results. So I think the answer to your question, Tim, from our perspective is, that's going to become ubiquitous across the industry, and hopefully we'll be at the forefront of that. But I think AI generally, particularly around the customer-facing sets of activities, will be very important for the major banks as they seek to kind of improve quality outcomes and reduce cost. And I think we, we do a lot of amazing work with one of our board members, Rose Luckin, who's really referred to as the Doctor Who of AI in education. She's a remarkable woman. She talks about the potential of AI, but also its dangers in the education space as well. And so we're very strong on the ethical use of AI, and sticking to the right side of some of its capabilities. As Anthony Seldon said, AI could be the worst thing for the human race, or the best thing, and at the moment I'm not sure. We're very much on the best thing for the human race, but it needs to be handled sensitively and ethically.
Fascinating, really fascinating altogether, Timothy. One of the shortest questions of the day. You got one of the most expansive answers. Absolutely intriguing stuff. Got some nice words of thanks from Ian Dudden. Very interesting. Thank you, Lee. Thank you to everybody in this question segment so far. We're going to come to one question from Kevin Wolf in a minute. But don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, you've still got time to hit that like button. Give us a little bit of love. Help us with search engine optimization and all of those sorts of issues to do with, well, artificial intelligence, so that the Googleplex and others can manage to find this video more easily. And we can spread the word about markets positivity and bringing the opportunity for prosperity to people across the world through companies like OSTC and its CEO, Lee Hodgkinson, who's here today. And of course, don't forget, if you're not already, subscribe to Exchange Invest, because that way you'll get the details and the information about the business of bourses every day into your email box. Thank you very much, says Timothy Campbell. So, amongst other thanks, we've got a couple of questions have come in just as I was talking. First of all, Kevin Wolf. Good evening, Kevin. It's lovely to hear from you. It's wonderful in this virtual world that we can all manage to commune together, and it just feels like, wow, the years are passing by without an elegant fashion. So, Kevin asks, hi, Lee and Patrick. From the inside and through the lens of a trading firm, you've both seen exchanges in more developed nations grow to unprecedented levels. Do you view that as a positive development? Lee?
Broadly, yes. Business begets business. And I think that in those developing markets, a flourishing capital market is really, really essential to underpin the health of the economy. So I do. I think what's interesting, and one of the things that we used to struggle with at some of the exchange global trade associations was, the world is really split into two parts. You've got exchanges that are in fierce competition with each other, typically in the European Union, and of course in America. And then you've got big exchanges in the developing world, which are still protected by government legislation. That essentially they're still monopolies. I make no comment on what's better or worse, but I think we will see in the developing world, the domestic exchanges grow to very, very serious levels. We've seen it with Hong Kong. Patrick commented on that recently in the newsletter. Some of the Chinese exchanges will grow very large. We've referenced India already. We've referenced Brazil. They really will become significant players in the domestic markets. The question for me will be, how does that translate in the years ahead on the international stage? I think there's some big questions open, where you've got kind of closed capital accounts and these kind of things. Getting money in and out is not typically easy in some of these countries. Some of the regulatory landscape needs to evolve to be a little bit more stable for international markets, but I only see more growth in the developing world, and as I say, we're positioning ourselves to take advantage of that.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you very much, Kevin Wolf. I'm not going to add too much more to that because I'm in heated agreement with what Lee has said. Although, if you want to read a bit more, you can always try my latest book, because actually, Victory or Death is exactly on that topic. The victory of exchanges and the importance of centralized markets the world over, and how that is driving us forward through a multiplicity of different factors, including blockchain, the cryptocurrency issue, and all sorts of other factors. And actually, I'm finding myself at the moment with a fascinating opportunity across the world, and that brings us beautifully to Another question, Rui Matos. Hey Rui, good to see you this evening. Lee, how do you see distributed ledger technology and tokenization evolving down the road?
Crikey, I'm being tested tonight. Thanks, Rui. Good to hear from you. I hope you're well. I think the interesting thing for all of these new technologies is similar to Bitcoin as well. It's not necessarily the technology itself that matters, it's what people do with it. And I think we've seen a lot of false dawns with tokenization and DLT, where people have been hung up on those technologies for the sake of those technologies, and the use cases haven't really been that's compelling in my view, and Patrick's made a lot of comments about that in years gone by. But I think where there are use cases, and obviously Peter Randall and his gang have done an amazing job. Where there are strong use cases, I think the technology will make a real difference for years to come.
And therefore, on that note, actually, it's very interesting. You've touched upon the whole way that you're developing things with Sishi. You've talked about this amazing opportunity. I mean, just talking about, what was it, Ghana alone, 100,000 graduates being churned out every year, not all of them managing to find jobs very easily. And that's a picture that we're getting across the world. Incredible unemployment issues in places as well. Small countries, relatively small countries like the Lebanon, all the way through to very large ones, burgeoning opportunities. So Lee, talk us through this, because you've mentioned this AI technology, you've mentioned all the things that are going forward. How on earth do you prioritize in a morning what you're going to do next? Because it seems to me that you're just a target-rich environment for opportunity.
Well, it's a great example of surrounding yourself with brilliant people. So, Peter Leonardos and Ian Cohen are very, very good at keeping me focused. So we do a lot of work on our strategic plan, and we stick to it. So, at the moment, we're spending this year really focusing on China. We were talking about female leaders. We hired an amazing woman in China, Fladia from HSBC, who's leading our business there. China is going to be a very, very strong area of our energy this year. India will come later in the year and next, and we're starting to plan for Africa. So we've got very, very clear blocks in our technology business. We've got a great team who are focused on rolling out the AI products. We've got a couple of pilots on the go. Also with the biometrics, with a number of firms like ours and slightly different as well. In our trading business, we've been doing that a long time. We know exactly what we're doing. So there is a tremendous target-rich opportunity set for us, but we are laser focused on executing that 5-year plan. We're about halfway through. We've got another 2.5 years to go of that, and we know exactly what we're doing and when we're doing it. But the strength of that all comes from the people that you have on the leadership team. And I remember we were talking before this about, and I mentioned my 18 months working for ICE. I remember a panel at IDX a few years ago where the major exchange CEOs were asked what keeps them up at night, and there were very interesting answers, but I thought Jeff Sprecher gave the best answer. He said, the only thing that keeps me up at night is whether I'm able to keep the very best people around me, because if you've got the best people around you, they will see threats emerging, and they will work to mitigate them, and they will seek opportunities, and they'll work to exploit them. So it's really all about that collective power of the OSTC team, and staying focused on what is a really exciting and clear strategic plan.
Lee Hodgkinson, thank you very much. I mean, last week we were talking about this incredible 15 petabyte lake that Paul Humphreys is looking after at BMLL Technologies. This week you were telling us about, well, with Sishi, you're implementation of artificial intelligence and so much else besides in a data and analytics package. You're talking about the data that lies below the surface. And I think that's something which is fascinating, because you're talking about so many different instances of technology, so many usages, and such an incredibly rich opportunity set for OSTC and the way that you're trying to mobilize the future of the trading business throughout the world so that it's inclusive to everybody, with a particular focus, of course, on those amazing demographics where we've got those 1.7 billion people across the world, mostly in the emerging world, who are between the ages of 10 and 24 and are crying out for the opportunities to have prosperous existences that can feed themselves and feed their families and allow them to have provision for a long and healthy life. Thank you very much for some incredible answers, Lee Hodgkinson. It's been a joy to have you on the show. Thank you very much to Ian Dutton, to S-Wave, to Tim Campbell, to Dayan Kulev, to Jonathan Seymour, Martin Watkins, Peter Leonardos, Jack Bolton, Kevin Wolf, Rui Matos, and everybody else who's been tuning into the show today with a question or a comment, including a woman on it. That's it from episode 19 of the IPO-VID Livestream. Thanks again to my guest, Lee Hodgkinson, the Chief Executive of OSTC, a company about which I'm sure we'll be hearing a great deal more in the future. I'll be back, same place, same time next week. It only remains for me to thank our production crew, Claude, Pippa, Beata, and Ola, as well as Veronica. Thank you very much. Have a great week in markets. See you next Tuesday.